Hello everyone. I am going to go through the overview of edTPA and the 3 tasks that you are responsible for during student teaching. This video is going to focus on the overview and then task 1, and I'm going to speak very quickly, so follow along, but please feel free to pause and rewind and all that kind of fun stuff. All right, so the link for all of this is in the syllabus. So just click on that link, go to your content area. You'll see on the website there, you'll see a link for handbook, and then click on your content area. I clicked on science. I could have picked any one of them, but I was a middle school science teacher, so I'm going to do science. I'll show you where there's overlap between the content areas, and I'll show you where things get content area specific. Okay? The real point here is to understand what the rubrics are asking for. That's really what it's all about. Okay? So, if you have your handbook open, I would say make sure to have this alongside. You want your content area so you can sort of pause and look at the language of that one. And if you happen to be science, great. All right, so let's do this here. If you take a look at just the very first part of it, let me go over to it here. So this is a very big document, right? It seems overwhelming at first, but what this document really is about is trying to understand what's being asked of you for the assessment. Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to hand in parts. You're going to submit parts at a time, and you're going to start with task 1. Task 1 is focused on planning for instruction and assessment. So task 1, as you see there, is planning, right? Just sort of the main thing that we do before we teach something, planning. So they want to see how well you're going to plan. The second one is instruction, right? So task 2 is called instruction, instructing and engaging students in learning, and task 3 is assessment, assessing student learning. Okay, so like I said, I'm going to do a little bit of an overview here. What do you need to know about edTPA in general? This is something that is very granular, so you need to pay attention to a lot of things all at once. But basically what you're doing is you're doing what's called a lesson segment, and the segment is, as you can see there in bold, 3 to 5 consecutive lessons. So you're doing about 3 to 5 hours of instruction. So obviously this will be something that happens over the course of multiple days, consecutive multiple days in your content area, and I'm focusing on secondary education here, so this will be for middle and high school teachers. So we're calling this the learning segment. edTPA is not asking for you to do an entire unit plan. It's just asking for you to do basically no more than a week's worth of lessons, and then analyzing the heck out of them. All right. So lesson segment, keep that in mind. 3 to 5 hours of connected instruction, which basically just means consecutive, unless you have some weird thing that's sort of breaking it up, right? So, all right. You have the overview here of planning, assessment, instruction. I'm going to blow through some of this so we can get right to the things that you need to really start to wrap your mind around, right? All right, so here's the overview of task 1. Okay, you can see this here, and we'll go through some of the bullet points here on the left. There's 5 rubrics for task 1. The only subject area that's going to have a different number of total number of rubrics is modern language or world language, there's less rubrics, but everybody's doing 15, and they're doing less than that. And I'm blanking on the number, 13 or something along those lines. Anyway, obviously you can see that there if you're a world language teacher. All right, so here's what you're going to do. This is true for everybody, every content area. Select one class as a focus for this assessment. All right, so you may be teaching 3 periods or 3 different classes or 5 different classes in a day. You're going to focus on one of them. My suggestion is to have 2 that you would consider doing, and really focus on one, but have another one as a backup just in case. Right? Provide relevant context information. So that there's a sheet for that, and it's just called Context for Learning. Let me show you that. Right, and if you go back to the website, you can download this too, and it looks like this. All right. So what are we looking at here? Right, this is the Context for Learning. This is part of what you would submit. It just gives the background of information about the class that you're teaching. So it's just a sorry for the speed here. It's very simple, very straightforward kind of stuff. So don't get too nervous about this one. You can read through that. There's nothing here that really should trip you up. Okay, just some basic questions about the class, right? And then you can just fill it out as is. So take a look at that when you get a second. I'm going to go back to focusing on overview and get into task 1. All right. So 3 to 5 consecutive lessons, 3 to 5 hours. This is what I was talking about before. And, if you think about it, it's fairly reasonable, but also, depending on how things go, it can be a tight amount of time trying to get everything in. And you'll see as you go through the tasks, you have to really think about when these things are happening within those time periods. So one thing I would do real quickly is sketch out 5 days. Because if you figure 45 minutes each, you're easily between 3 and 5 hours, right? So I would sketch out the 5 days, and I would start to put in some of the key components into the outline just to see where they might logically sit. The way in which you go about planning is obviously going to be evaluated too, so things should be planned and laid out and sequenced in ways that are good for you, good, and certainly good for the students. Right? That's the real gauge here. Is it good for the students? So the next bullet point here, the 4th one, determine essential focus for your learning segment. This really just means, what is your topic? What are the things that the students are, essentially, what are the learning outcomes? What are the learning targets for that learning segment? Okay, so be really clear about what it is that students are going to learn. What are the takeaways? And as you can see there in that paragraph, it gets a little content specific. This being science, it's going to have things like science concepts and application of scientific practices and so forth, right? So again, take a look at what that says for your content area. Next one, write and submit a lesson plan for each lesson in a learning segment. I think we oftentimes default to one lesson plan per day, and that's a good default to stick with. You can get creative, and many other times in life, this one probably makes most sense just to do it, one class period at a time equals one lesson. So just a recommendation. Does it have to be that way? No, but this may not be the area to get overly creative, right? Next one, select and submit key instructional materials needed to understand what you and the students will be doing. Okay, so making sure to have a description about what those key materials are, right? We'll give the rationale for why you're using them, why you think they're good tools or good methods or whatever it is that you're doing, right? Next one, choose one language function and other language demands important to understanding blah, 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 your content area, essentially, right? Identify a learning task where students are supported to use this language. So this is going to get into this concept of academic language. We're certainly going to spend quite a bit of time looking at what we mean by that and how to support academic language. The very quick overall is that within every language, there's really at least two languages. One being the everyday use language, the really repetitive words and sentences that we say really frequently that we don't have to think too much about. And then there's all the academic language. There's the professional language. There's the technical language, and so forth, right? So that's what we're talking about. Is that second group there? That um, as teachers, we spend a lot of time in that area with our students. So how are you supporting your students to really understand that higher advanced language, right? The next one, respond to commentary prompts prior to teaching the learning segment. So there are prompts that you're expected to write about before teaching the learning segment. So make sure to do that. Again, the prompts are on the website as well. And should anybody come across this video who's not one of my students, this material is available through your university or college, and edTPA has availability too. So you just gotta go searching for it. But every content area needs to do that, where you are giving a written response and description to the various prompts that they're asking for. I'm not going to focus on the prompts right now. I'm just going to focus on the tasks with the rubrics that go with each of the three tasks. Okay. Last but not least, submit copies of all written assessments and clear directions for oral or performance assessments for the learning segment. You get the idea there. So submit your work. Okay. So let's move on. Right. This is the overview. So, before we move on, right. Select one class. Make sure you do the relevant context information, basically the background of who you're teaching. Make sure it's 3 to 5 consecutive lessons, about 3 to 5 hours in length in total. Make sure you have a topic that's focused and clear, understandable, makes sense. Make sure you do a lesson plan for each one of the lessons in the learning segment, so that should be 3 to 5 as well. Select and submit your instructional materials, right? So do a good description of what those are and make sure you can submit them. And then start to focus on academic language and one language function and other language demands, blah, blah, blah. But make sure you're working on being really clear about how to support academic language. And in this case, make sure you're, for task 1 at least, make sure you're writing the commentary or responding to the commentary prompts before that. Okay? Alright. I'll come back to task 2 and task 3 in another video. So let's get down to task 1 here. Okay. So all the things I just said, they're delineated there once again. Let me go to the first rubric. Here we are. So let's get a feel for the rubric itself, right? So it's going to be somewhere around page 13, 15, something like that for you, depending on your content area and how much is there. So go ahead and pull yours up, right? So level 1, level 2, neither of those are places that you want to be, okay? You really do need to be somewhere around level 3, level 4. Level 5 is, difficult to get by all measures, but attainable. But really, 3 and 4 is you're doing okay. 4 is sort of the you should be happy if you're getting a 4, right? So we're gonna really focus on 3, 4, and 5 in each one of the rubrics here, right? So this is task 1, rubric 1. Okay, 5 rubrics for task 1. Remember, this is task 1 is focused on planning. So the language here is going to be, in rubric 1, is pretty content area focused, but you're going to see some similarities in your content area. So you might want to pause right now and just look through rubric 1 that is actually yours. Okay, so pause. All right, welcome back. So what are we looking at here? How do the candidates, that's you, plans build students' abilities to use science concepts and scientific practices during inquiry and to explain or make predictions about real-world phenomenon. So, probably should be phenomena, but anyway. So the idea here, at least in the science world, is we're doing something very sciencey, right? So if you're a history teacher or an art teacher, you're going to have something different that you're looking at here. But it's going to be, rubric 1 is going to be pretty content area focused. So level 3, what are we talking about? Candidates' plans, that's right. Candidate is referring to student teacher. Candidates' plans for instruction build on each other to support students to learn science concepts, investigate phenomenon by engaging in scientific practices through inquiry, and construct explanations of the phenomenon or reasonable predictions based on evidence and or data. So, right, that's a lot of information right there. Basically, level 3 is just saying that it's obvious that the lesson plans are doing these content area functions, right? So that's the common ground here for all the content areas. It's, are your plans building on each other as they should be? And that should make sense, right? What's the difference between, 3 sounds pretty good, right? What's wrong with that, right? Obviously, if you look at 2 and 1, level 2 and level 1, you're going to see some real difficulties there, okay? Again, you can read through those on your own. I'm going to focus on things that you should be doing and just getting some clarity here on level 3, 4, and 5 especially. So, level 4, candidates' plans for instruction build on each other to support students too. And you see a lot of similar language there, right? So, in this level, the words that are bolded are now different than level 3. So, construct, that third bullet down there, construct evidence-based. Well, that's a new level, right? So, evidence-based explanations, okay? So that's something, again, science content-oriented, science skills-oriented, and you have to look at that if you're a science teacher and see, what does that mean? How do I do that? Again, other content areas are going to have different parts there, but basically what we're doing is going from level 3, which would be, good teaching. Level 4 is going to be a bit more advanced, probably more where we actually want our students to be. Better than acceptable for sure. And level 5 is they're moving from providing evidence-based explanations to evaluating evidence-based explanations. Okay. You see the words "and" in level 3, 4, and 5. That means all of them have to be there. You have to be doing all of those, right? So it's really important to understand the difference between and or in all of these rubrics, because sometimes you'll have the choice and sometimes you won't. So when you're planning for your lessons, you need to look at the difference between and or. And in this case, and means all of them need to be there. So can you hit level 5 here? Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Getting your students to construct and evaluate evidence-based explanations, pretty good. Right? So there's your target. If you miss it a little bit, is it a big deal? No. Are they providing explanations? Yes. Great. Level 3. Are they providing evidence-based explanations? Oh, even better. Level 4. Are they providing evidence-based explanations that they're evaluating? Level 5. So you're going to have something like that in all of the content areas. So again, just take a look at what the differences are between level 3, 4, and 5. Okay? Again, pause if you need to. Moving on to rubric 2. How does a candidate use knowledge of his or her students to target support for students to use, in this case, science concepts and scientific practices during blah, 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 blah. Okay, all of that's content area focused, but the first part is going to be the common set of skills that you are all responsible for. So let's take a look at level 3 here. The planned supports, right? So this is about how we support our students with their learning needs. The planned supports are tied to learning objectives and the central focus with attention to the characteristics of the class as a whole. All right, so that sounds pretty good. Level three always sounds pretty good when you first look at it. You go, oh yeah, this sounds like what we should be doing, right? Let's look at level 4, and we'll do a little comparison here. Planned supports are tied to learning objectives and the central focus. Okay, so that still stays the same. The new part is supports address the needs of specific individuals or groups with similar needs. What does that mean? Well, this is about the kind of supports that we provide. This could be through differentiation, it could be ELL, it could be special ed supports. But what you need to do is identify individuals or a group of students who have similar needs in your class and be really clear about the kind of specific supports that they're getting based on the needs that they have in connection to the learning outcomes that you have for that lesson. I'll say that once more, right? You're going to provide supports that are specific to students with whatever their individual or group needs are. And by group, I mean small group with similar needs here, right? And then making sure that it's tied to the learning objectives or learning outcomes. Okay, so what's the difference between 4 and 3? So 4 is doing a really good job of showing what the specific needs are. Okay, 3 is just focused on the class as a whole. Right, so there's 3 would be, I would look at the lesson plan and see that there's a good lesson plan here overall, really good lesson plan, but there's no attention to students who have various needs, and you're not doing anything to support them, right? So that's the difference between 4 and 3. 5, you see the language there, level 4 plus. So that means everything that's in level 4 plus this last or additional aspect. Supports include specific strategies to identify and respond to preconceptions, common errors, and misunderstandings for the majority of students. Now, this is something that's specific to science content. We do talk quite a bit about preconceptions and misconceptions and things that students oftentimes think is going on in nature. Common misconceptions kind of stuff. So 5 is just adding that layer in there, something that we as science teachers know that there's a lot of times there's misconceptions about whatever that topic or the content or skill is. So we're addressing that in addition to the specific supports for students in connection with the learning objectives. So you can see how this sort of ratchets up. 3, 4, and then 5. All right. Rubric 3. How does the candidate use knowledge of his or own how does the candidate use knowledge of her students to justify instructional plans? Basically, this means what, right? You are now starting to see, you've been seeing patterns of your students, so you're trying to teach to who they actually are rather than just teaching to them sort of generically, right? So level 3, candidate justifies why learning tasks or their adaptations are appropriate using examples of students' prior academic learning, prior knowledge, or personal, cultural, or community assets. Let me sort of pause there for a second. Level 4 is and. So you're doing both of those things, connecting to prior knowledge and to personal, cultural, or community assets. So that just means culturally responsive teaching, personal interests, something about the community in general. You're doing both of those, right? That's a good thing. going back to level 3 for a second, that bottom paragraph or bottom sentence, candidate makes superficial connections to research and or theory. Level 4 says makes connections, so they got rid of the word superficial. And then level 5 is candidate is really justifying, right? Candidate's justification is supported by principles for research and or theory. This is just you're making decisions about how to teach, right? Where are those decisions coming from? What are you informed by? So 3, 4, and 5 are saying, hey, you're making some connections to research and theory. 4 is obviously like, doing a pretty good job there. 3 is, you've made connections, kind of superficial. 4 is pretty good. And 5 is like, oh yeah, that's a solid argument. That makes a lot of sense, right? It's a well-supported argument. Okay? Moving on. Again, pause if you need to and go back over things. Rubric 4. How does the candidate identify and support language demands associated, in this case, with a key science learning task? So this is academic language, right? Science, as we all know, is one of the most demanding has the most language demands of any content area, even in many cases more than modern and world languages. In any case, the beginning half of this is something that is going to be similar for all the content areas, so we'll talk about it in that way. General language supports, this is level 3. General language supports address use of 2 or more language demands. Okay? So you have the sort of list there. Function, vocabulary, symbols, syntax, discourse. Obviously, it's going to be really important to sort of hone in your content areas and figure out what all those things are. Maybe your list is a little bit different in whatever content area you may be in. Level 4, so what's the difference going from 3 to 4, right? So you've, at least in this case in science, you made use of 2 or more language demands. That's level 3. Level 4, targeted language supports address use of, and then you see that word and. Okay, so it's basically the same list that's in level 3, but you're doing all 3, right? You're doing all of them for level 4. And then level 5 says, yep, all of that, level 4, plus language supports are designed to meet the needs of students with different levels of language learning. So now, not only are you doing all of those things, right, vocabulary, language function, syntax, discourse, but you're also doing it in a way that's differentiating based on needs. So that's level 5. All right, last one for this task. How are the informal and formal assessments selected or designed to monitor students' progress toward using, in this case, science concepts, blah, 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 blah. Right, so how are the informal and formal assessments? This is about how are you planning your assessments? Not implementing them, and certainly not looking at the data at this moment. This is just simply planning assessments. So, level 3. The assessments provide evidence to monitor students' understanding of, and then you have various science pieces there, right? And it's an and, so that means all of them. And it's during the learning segment, so it's not in just in one lesson plan. You've done it, yay, right? Pat yourself in the back. I did one lesson plan. No, this is throughout the whole learning segment. Okay. So, the assessments themselves are designed in a way that they provide evidence for you, the teacher, right, to monitor students' understanding. Level 4 is the assessments provide multiple forms of evidence. Okay, so it's really the same as 3, except we can see that there's multiple forms of evidence, or assessments. You're, as a teacher, getting multiple forms of evidence about what your students know, so that you can make decisions and plan accordingly, right? So it should be really obvious in your lesson plans that you're making sure that all of that's included. Right? How are you going to know what your students know? And you see on the bottom there, throughout the learning segment. So 3 is like, okay, you've assessed them. Cool, great. And it's during the learning segment, so you can interpret that as maybe even a little different than I just said previously. You've done it once or twice. This is you've done it really quite consistently throughout the learning segment, so it can't just be a one and done sort of thing, right? No matter how good it is, it won't get level 4 if it's just one and done. So we need to use that tool of assessment, not standardized testing or anything like that, right? Just as this is informal and formal of your design. You want to know how your students are doing, kind of assessments. And level 5 is all of that. Level 4 plus the assessments are strategically designed to allow individuals or groups with specific needs to demonstrate the learning. Once again, this level 5 is focused on individual needs. So the assessments have a design that can support the specific needs of your students. Maybe there's some differentiation of assessments. Okay, that would qualify for a level 5 here. All right. Phew, we did it. That was the first 5. Overview and task 1. All right. I'm going to call it quits on this one. Check out the next video on rubrics 6 through 10, which is going to be task 2. All right. This was fun. Yay. See you soon.